Oh, the famous Von Tempsky Bowie, or to some infamous Von Tempsky Bowie. Some L6 steel here. Look at that beast. And an 11-inch blade. A lot of this stuff varies in terms of stock thickness. This here is about 3/16. I know some people get about 1/4 inch. I did not. We got a convex grind here. This grind is thick. It's not the most ergonomic knife, but it is a beast. And I've got some red oak here that I'm going to tackle a little bit, test this knife out. Let's see what she does. And I've owned this knife for quite a few years now, pretty much since these were starting to come on the market. Good solid red oak is always a test. And if you live in an area like I do, you better get used to working with the hardwoods, because it's predominantly hardwood area where I'm at. Now, don't get me wrong, you know, there's different types of poplar and things like that, but for the most part, you come across these types of woods, and the harder types of woods are great. You know, you got to take your time a little bit, but they're usually great in all sorts of applications because they're stronger. Well, as I said, you're not going to get too much ergonomics out of this knife. And on top of that, you know, you got to think too about this low height grind. All right, so when you compare it to something like a BK9, we'll just say, and I use that as an example because to me that's the best I have in terms of a using blade. You know, you have a higher grind with that knife, nearly full height, right? Full height flat grind. I knew that branch was going to swing back, but I didn't think it was going to at that point. So a lot of times this knife, just the sheer brute force of it, will break or shatter a lot of stuff that you're hitting because of that grind. This is old school stuff here. Okay, this was mid 1800s. And this was typically how you would see something like this. This is a battle-proven blade in the New Zealand Wars with Gustavus von Tempsky. So you're looking at something that's combat, but you're also looking at something that was used in the forest. One thing that had happened early on with this knife is this. You might not be able to hear that. Maybe that. The guard loosened. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal at all. But I have heard this happening to other people. There are ways that you can fix that if it becomes an issue with you. So for demonstration purposes here, I'm going to just do a couple notches and see how this is going to handle. Once again, this is hardwood stuff here, so I normally wouldn't maybe pick red oak to do certain notches, but in the name of conservation, if there's a dead oak tree or some down limbs, I will pick that rather than taking a live sapling. And it's just going to be a couple more minutes of work. Let me get my initial stop cut here, and we'll just notch this. As I said, that thick grind, you can feel it. Completely doable. I had heard one story of a man who had served with Von Tempsky and had one of these Bowies, and he was visited decades later by someone who was researching that whole conflict, and the man still carried this Bowie knife on his farm, and I guess the tip was had been broken off years prior and reground, and the man cut everything with it, even cut bread and things like that. So I thought that was pretty interesting that someone had such a connection to that knife, and having served with it and most likely fought with it is probably why he had such an attachment to it. Now, as I said, in terms of ergonomics and things like that, you're not really going to get that with this knife. I've seen people use grip tape and different things. There is a lanyard on here, so I've seen people use lanyards and different things like that. I'm not really into a lot of that stuff. I want it to sort of work as is, and I want to get used to whatever I'm using and not have to rely on anything external to help out with that. And you will. You get the hang of whatever it is. Your hand may slide a bit. You may have certain vibrations at certain times, but it's a brute force, heavy-duty tool. I have seen this knife, not in my doing, but a friend of mine, I had seen this knife have a bend in it, going through some knotty frozen hornbeam. And this knife took it. And as you watch any other reviews, you will see that this knife will take it. there's a gentleman, taking out pallets with this knife. And you'll see what I was talking about brute force, where sometimes it just blew the pallet right through the nail, that was holding it, the wood on the pallet, just pretty much decimated it rather than chopped it. This knife, it has a capability of getting very sharp. I do have a slight ding up here that I had acquired some time back. It is not really noticeable now, but I had killed a rabbit with this knife, and from killing it, I had just lightly grazed some soil, and there happened to be a little bit of a rock there, and it was no big deal. I shouldn't say chipped. I rolled it. So that's another good thing. That the heat treat here is good, and you can see that in the spine of this knife. I will have a tabletop review of this knife, but this will serve you. It's going to do every single thing you're going to ask of it. All right, it's gonna do it. Make no mistake about that. As I said, it's probably not the most friendly user, being that it has this low, thick grind and this very large guard. But there really isn't any problems when it comes down to it. This knife is definitely a heavy-duty user blade. It will serve you well if you are into this and into this style, and you don't mind some of its shortcomings. I don't mind some of its shortcomings because of just its brute force, and it's a tool that I know has been used by many. And there's many other knives that were like this back in the day, very similar to this, and they were used, and people got over, the grip not being perfect, or the grind not being, this certain height or that certain height, or the guard being, half guard or too big, or, people took this knife and used it. Did what they had to do. If they had to make a pot hanger, way out in the forest, in the mountains, they had to, make quick shelters, any type of firecraft, butchering of large game, whatever it could be, it's been done. Fighting, it's been done. No doubt about it. So these knives, even though they're not, the fancy or fancier knives, more ergonomic knives that we have today, these will still compete with it. I would not feel undergunned having this on me instead of a BK9, excuse me, or in Ontario, SP10. This knife would fit right in there, and it would see me through whatever situation I was in. I'm going to have a tabletop, like I said, and review a little bit more about some of the history on this knife and some of the different options that are available with it. Once again, thank you very much for watching.